We never meet Casey Hartley in Night in the Woods. We never get to hear him play drums, experience his friendship with May and her crew firsthand, or learn about who he is as a person, his hopes, his dreams, his feelings about Possum Springs. But his absence lingers over the game. From conversations in the narrative, to the game's sense of loneliness, to the band practice segments, Night in the Woods constantly reminds us that Casey is gone, which in turn teaches May one of her most important lessons on her road to growth. We first hear about Casey on day 1, after the first band practice segment, when May asks Greg where he is. Greg explains that he's missing, that the belief is that he hopped the train and left town for good. But the game makes us aware right away that there's likely more to his story. Even before we hear about him in dialogue, we can find the missing person poster in town center. And immediately after the dialogue, we find the severed arm outside of the click-clack. All of this comes together to suggest that nothing is as it seems in Possum Springs, and that it's unlikely that Casey just ran away from home. In effect, these two moments, finding the severed arm and learning about Casey's disappearance, serve as the inciting incident of the game, propelling the narrative onward and giving the player a mystery to piece together as they progress. Casey comes up in dialogue again the day after Harfest, after May sees Ide kidnap someone. The kidnapping alone should serve as a clue to Casey's fate, but if the player misses the connection, then it becomes crystal clear in her conversation with Germ, where she worries about what might have happened to him. Though Germ assures her that Casey will be fine, he unknowingly contradicts this when he brings up his own run-in with the cult, another hint to the game's direction. On day 10, another conversation with Germ brings Casey back to the forefront. In this conversation, May asks Angel, one of Germ's crust punk friends, if they've seen him. Though Angel says that they haven't, they promise to ask around about him. Primarily, this serves to put Casey back on our minds one more time before the finale, when the truth about what happened to him is laid bare. Down in the mines, it's revealed that the cult sacrificed Casey to the Black Goat because they felt that he wasn't going to contribute anything to Possum Springs, aside from abandoning kids and crimes, as they so kindly put it. It's a harrowing revelation, one that cements the villainous nature of the cult and ties together the dark secrets of Possum Springs. In the epilogue, Casey comes up a final time as the group debates what to do with what they learned about the cult, and whether or not they should tell his parents about his fate. Ultimately, they decide not to. But it's a shame that we'll never get a Night in the Woods 2, because I doubt they would have been able to stick to this plan long term. Looking at Night in the Woods as a whole, I think you can make the argument that the game is often drawing attention to his absence, even when it isn't explicitly doing so. Throughout the game, in between our conversations with major characters, there's a general sense of loneliness, a sense that something is missing from May's life that once was there. The more I think about it, the more I've come to believe that the disappearance of Casey is one of the biggest reasons for this. We know that Casey and May were close. They played in the band together. And Casey is one of just 4 people May has on Messenger. So it's fair to wonder how different May's return to Possum Springs would have been if Casey had still been alive. It's easy for me to imagine Casey showing up at May's house on occasion, and joining her as she travels around the town. May's got some great friends in Greg and B, but she doesn't have the type of friend who you can do just about anything with. Greg's hangouts are spontaneous, adventurous, and daring, while B's are structured and more purposeful. These are great, of course, but neither fills the role of a friend who you can just sit around with, just chill out with, and enjoy each other's company while doing very little at all. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the role Casey filled in May's life. Another way that the game draws attention to Casey's absence is through the band practices. B does an admirable job filling in with her computer, but if you've ever played in a rock band, then you know that the drummer is far and away the most important member of the band. A strong drummer can make a good band great, and even a decent drummer can cover up a lot of the flaws of a mediocre band. And no matter how good or on time B's drum tracks are, they surely can't replicate the human element that Casey brought to his instrument. His absence in this setting has to be particularly difficult for May, given that she's the bass player. Bass and drums come together to set the foundation for a band, and play off of each other quite a bit. Speaking as a bass player myself, who played in quite a few bands back in the day, if I didn't have a drummer to rely on, I was pretty lost. And every time I tried to play with a new drummer, it was like learning a different language. I'll never forget how jarring it was to leave my high school band, with a drummer I'd built a strong bond with, and move out to Pittsburgh for college, where I had to learn to play with someone who played the drums in an entirely different way. So I can't imagine how hard it must be to not only have one of her best friends go missing, but to have the dynamic of her band and her relationship with the music she plays forever changed by his absence. One of the undercurrents of all this is that I feel pretty strongly that May sees herself in Casey. She's a cat, just like him. And though we don't know what his plans were for the future, given that the cult viewed him as a non-contributor, it's likely that he spent his days much as May does, wandering around town, hanging out with friends, looking for things to do. I've said this before in some of the comments of my videos, but I think that if it weren't for the glimmer, for her connection to the black goat, May would have been a candidate for sacrifice as well. She doesn't have a job, doesn't have much direction. The glimmer is the only thing that saves her. And I think May recognizes this, that under different circumstances, she could have ended up just like Casey, a victim of a conservative murder cult that cares little about the people in its town, or what troubles they might be going through, unless they meet their archaic definition of a contributor. To me, that's why Casey Hartley is so important to the story, and to May's growth as a character. He serves as an example to her that not everyone gets to survive the horrors of their hometown, that not everyone gets to leave and move to Bright Harbor, that not everyone gets to die anywhere else. In both versions of the epilogue, May is hopeful about the future. There are many reasons for this, but I have no doubt that the memory of Casey, and the knowledge that she could have ended up like him, plays a part. As I said earlier, we're unlikely to ever get a Night in the Woods 2. But if we ever do, I'd hope to see a May who's carved out a place for herself in the world. Maybe she's living in Bright Harbor, still holding it down in Possum Springs, or living somewhere entirely different. Maybe she's working at a taco shop, or starting up a career as a pro wrestler. But wherever she is, and whatever she's doing, I'm certain that she's honoring the memory of her old friend, Casey Hartley. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then please be sure to like, subscribe, and consider supporting me on Patreon. Before I roll out, I would like to mention that Scott Benson has confirmed that Casey did not write the lyrics to Die Anywhere Else. However, I still felt it was an appropriate title to use for this video because I think that the lyrics still exemplify how he probably felt about Possum Springs. Huge shout out to my Night in the Woods collaborators, Wolf.Godwin and Jordi, Jaen, Moreno for the music for my videos and my channel art. Speaking of Wolf, be sure to check out their animation series Center of Everything. They do something really cool with Casey Hartley, something I think a lot of you will really enjoy. Next week, I'll be dropping a video on a potential connection between B's dad and the cult. You guys had some great comments about that on my last video, and I can't wait to dive into this topic. After that, I'll be dropping my first video on The Witcher 3. And then next month, when I get back into character commentaries, we'll be looking at another character that you guys have requested quite a bit. So look out for a long-awaited video, and probably my longest yet, on May's grandfather. See you guys soon.